Hello and welcome to Battle 4 of Shining Force 2 the Goliath hack. We have a new character. We have Kazin. He's our first mage of the game. He's your stereotypical mage. Low attack, low defense, low HP, but lots of MP, and a pretty good spell. You can see kind of how he compares with the other characters there. The important thing with him, though, right now, an important change, is the Fairy Powder. Fairy Powder in Shining Force 2 the Goliath hack now heals MP rather than recovers from various ailments like stun and poison. This allows him to have a little bit more MP early on in the game, otherwise he's kind of a little bit restricted with that 21, particularly since his first spell, Blaze, now costs 4 MP rather than 2. So Battle 4 is kind of interesting because it's the first time in the game you really face off against like human enemies. Or something besides smoke in the air, rats, bats, and random gelatinous messes that crawl along the ground. There's another hack I've only seen videos of, which takes this battle in a little different course than I did. She thought it was kind of like the first time you face against a real professional army. And I thought that was actually a really good way of looking at it. But the consequence of that is that it was also very difficult, something you'd actually legitimately lose, and you'd have to be really good to actually beat. And I still didn't like that. There were going to be some difficult battles early on. Obviously the Galum Knight battle after this, and the Dark Smoke battle. But this, I wanted to keep more or less relatively simple. So here we're looking at some of the stats of all the different characters. The Galum Soldier is sort of important because I tried really hard to get him at 11 HP, just like he was in the original. I'm kind of a sucker for trying to get stats similar to how they were in the original on various different things. And definitely no exception with the Galum Soldier. The other reason I really wanted to get him at 11 HP is I wanted Kazin to have a good target to go after on a regular basis, where you can run out and just be like, yep, totally blazing the Galum Soldier, easy kills. And there are a couple reasons for that. One, he's in the original game, at least when I played it back, 10 years ago when I was a kid, my main goal in this battle always was to get Kazin up to level 5, because I figured he was pretty worthless, and the only way he was any good was to get Blaze level 2, because Blaze level 1 was completely, garbage. And I'm really sad that Jaha just stole that kill of that giant bat. That's pretty annoying. He likes to do that, actually, I find that of all my early characters, even though statistically speaking he should not get any extra double attacks, he does. He really likes getting all those extra doubles and stealing kills from people. It doesn't help that his attack is so outrageous compared to the rest of my force. So, some of that kind of comes into this. The idea is I want to get Kazin up to level 5 immediately. Part of it was just because, it's a new character, I wanted to kind of feature him a little bit. Although, to be totally fair, outside of Jaha and Kazin, that never really happens again. Maybe a little bit with Kiwi, the battle after you get him, because he can tank the Dark Smokes, but otherwise pretty similar. So there's another characteristic. These are the first times we're really encountering the Galum Soldiers and the Galum Archers. And there's an annoying little quirk with Shining Force 2 in that the Archers consistently, throughout the entire game, are among the toughest enemies you're going to face. Maybe not in their attack, but they just have a lot of HP or a lot of defense. They're as tough, if not tougher, than the regular soldiers. And this is in stark contrast to the original Shining Force game, where the Archers are, by and large, pathetically weak. Absolutely fragile glass, useless, opponents to compete against, whose only advantage really is that they have real long range and they like hiding out in difficult to reach locations. given Shining Force 2's lack of difficult-to-reach locations, most battles are waged on very wide-open maps, much to its detriment, honestly. Like, wide-open maps are pretty cool, but the entire 40 battles on basically wide-open maps, it's a little tiresome after a while. But you have you don't really have spots for archers anymore. And so having incredibly super weak archers that just happen to hide isn't very valuable. The bigger problem, however, is how they end up getting used in the game. Oftentimes they end up as bosses. And it's almost reminiscent of Shining Force 2 Gated, where all the mages ended up as bosses and therefore had insane amounts of HP and defense, just so that they were a little bit durable as the bosses. I'm not really sure why Shining Force 2 decided upon this, but I more or less inherited that characteristic when I made the hack. I wanted to stay true in some cases to the actual, the original game, and that was one of those such cases. But in this battle particularly, and in all of them I tried to look at trying to figure out how to get the archers a little bit weaker, a little, less HP, less defense, and a little bit, more attack to try to balance it out. And struggled, and this battle in particular I really didn't like. I really wanted to have the archers weak. Anytime they have this little image, I always thought that looked pathetically weak, that should have 0 HP, 0 defense, but decent attack and some range, And I couldn't do it. And the problem here is simply that you had to choose a base unit. You were given the Gallum Soldier, Knight, Mage, Archer, and Healer as your different choices of enemies, which more or less leaves you with 2 Grunt Soldiers, which would be the Archer and the Gallum Soldier. Frontliners. And because they're more or less the same, to have one, to give some longevity to the game, so that one is actually stronger than the other, they just made the Gallum Archers stronger. And really, I couldn't get away from that. So, Gallum Archers are better than Gallum Knights in every way, shape, and form. They're also a higher level to compensate for that. Here's one of the skips in the game. I ended up I was actually cooking some food and the timer rang, so I had to go take it off the stove. But it's also the reason... Oh wait! That one was not the stove, that was someone calling me on Skype. But that's actually why I'm re-recording the audio on this, to replace what was otherwise completely broken and now desynced audio. Another fun thing with Shining Force 2 is kind of how they envisioned archers. So I mentioned that, a lot of times they're bosses for the enemies, or in this case they're used kind of as an upgraded soldier, and therefore end up with a lot of HP, a lot of defense, a lot of these other capacities that you'd normally not see in an archer, or normally wouldn't expect. And it's funny on how all of these got transferred also to the characters, the force members who are archers. Archers have even the normal snipers, and even May have a surprisingly large amount of HP and defense relative to, say, magic users, who I usually equate them to. And when you go into brass gunners are actually, incredibly durable units. Play on super, and you use Road as one of your characters, he will be, in the original game, he will be one of the characters at the end of the game who can actually stand up to things like the Evil Beast or the Pyrohydra, and their very large attacks, and not die in one hit. So he'll be hanging out with the likes of, Peter and Eric and any of the other ones who can actually do that. So that's just such a different scenario, but to compensate for that, you then end up in a scenario where they're just horribly weak. They have no real attack and everything. What I did here is I didn't remember actually how much damage Blaze level 2 would do. I think it actually does 8. I don't actually remember even now. And so I didn't want to kill off the Gallum Soldier outright, because I'm a little experienced whore and really want to milk everything I can. And so I was just holding it off and saying, you know what, I'm going to let someone else normally attack it, rather than just blaze it for a one-hit kill. But now that I've got my little extra experience, I can then come back in, do the whole rounds, and then take Kazin and get the kill anyway. Obviously, little crazy things like this are not going to work quite so well later in the game, as I just have more enemies to deal with, perhaps less surplus magic and everything like that, but a lot of micromanagement you can kind of do early on. Also played these battles a lot more than some of the later ones, so... Interesting thing, actually, was that this battle, there are, I think, something like 4 or 5 battles. It's like 5 battles that are unchanged, essentially, from the original game. Where the opponent's AI and their placement and the units in the battle remain the same as they were in the original. Now, that has changed a little bit because I did change the AI in the first battle, so in some ways there's now only 4, but this is one of the 4. Where everything is exactly the same. All the characters are in the same locations, all the AI, everything. Obviously the stats are different, but that's just due to balancing issues and something of a necessity. When I first played this, I guess the first couple times I played this, I actually thought it was decently difficult. And then oddly found this time I played it, this run through, incredibly simple. And I really have no idea why. You know, it would be really interesting to see how things just kind of go down, but everything in this battle just fell into place exactly as I wanted. All the enemies behaved as I desired. I got all the experience except for that little Jaha thing early on that I wanted, and didn't even need to use any of my emergency medical herbs. One of the quirks of this game is that you face this relatively easy battle first here, before facing off in the much more difficult Gallum Knight battle. Even in the original, you ended up with that, and you don't get a shop in between. And so if you use up all your extra healing items, your only hope for healing is Sarah. And this causes a lot of problems, you know, because in the Gallum Knight battle, you really want to tank the Knight for as long as possible, so that you can then run back and kill off the mages that hide back there and everything else. But because you're short on MP, because Sarah's not even going to have as much MP as she has in this hack, that's just not really a very viable option unless their attack is just too low, or you are able to weasel them out, aggro them a little bit better. And so it's kind of important in this case to stock up on medical herbs before the battle, fight it, not use any of them, so that you can then do a lot of tanking later. Here I'm trying to check who should get the kill on this thing, and trying to figure out if it's worth for Sarah running in and taking it out. And I'm going to decide, yeah, why not? Let's try to get some experience from it. She could use it, and it was a good choice. Here I contemplated having Kazin walk around, but I didn't like getting him so close to the enemy units on the backside that he might get double-teamed, or even single-teamed with a double attack. I also wanted, I also saw that he had a lot of MP left, and it really didn't matter. Another thing that's sort of important is he has 24 MP right now, which of course is 6 castings of Blaze, and he would never gain a +4 pre-promo on his MP amount. I don't think anybody would, actually. As a result, getting another level at this point isn't very important, and so I don't actually focus on that. I look a little bit more on Bowie, Chester, Jaha, and getting Kazin, you know, higher up in level 5, but more or less spreading the experience. I also would probably try to avoid using that fairy powder. I tend to be someone who avoids using rarer items because this game is so incredibly tight on money. You seriously just do not have the cash to operate normally as you would in a regular Shining Force game. You know, something expensive like the fairy powder is something that you kind of treasure, We're like, you know, I'm going to keep this until I actually legitimately run out, if I just absolutely need more MP or something along those lines. Same, honestly, with all of the other healing items. So medical herbs are only 10, but the others are 200, 400, and I think something like 1500 for their costs. And you simply just don't have the funds to afford those regularly. And so you kind of save them, put one on your hero, maybe one on your mage, maybe one on your healer, any of those things to just try to create some sort of backup for dire situations. But really, it's got to be really dire, because until you hit promotion, it's cheaper to let the character die and revive them than it would be to use your items. And because suddenly in this hack, you know, gold is a serious consequence, you really don't want to just run around and lose all your cash for no good reason, you know? So, the last time I played this, Jaha did that exact same thing. He double attacked at the end and took a kill from somebody else who needed it. And of course this time he does the same thing, and I almost freaked out when I first played through this. I was like, no, you can't take it again, Jaha. I hate you. As I said, he seems to always double attack. I have no idea why. But then the Galamarcher dodged, and I was incredibly happy, actually. So Chester actually gets a pretty good boost early on in this hack, which is nice. Tried to make him a little bit more relevant than he was. He was always pretty good in the original game too, but all those 2s for upgrades, you'll notice him once we start the next video. I'll show you the stats again. He's pretty comparable with Jaha, suddenly, even though he is a level higher, so that's acceptable. But that about wraps that battle up. Thanks for listening, watching, and I'll see you guys next time with Battle 5 and the Galamarcher.